So this is week 3 of our blog video posts. I'm posting in Utah, Salt Lake City. It'll be my last day here. I'm not too excited about leaving, but I do plan on coming back, so that should be a fun journey. However, I hope you guys find the content in this video useful and engaging, and I will talk to you guys next time. This week we talked about avoiding cognitive distortions, which included catastrophizing and overgeneralizing, as well as labeling and personalization. Cognitive distortions can be considered slips in our thinking that we all make at times. They are a derivative of cognitive behavioral therapy. The main premise behind them is that your thoughts have an enormous impact on your emotions and the way you are feeling. So if you are feeling terrible, there is a big chance that you are thinking in an unhelpful way. These unhelpful thinking styles can cause us to jump to incorrect conclusions, make false assumptions, and much more. Catastrophizing refers to times when we take relatively minor negative circumstances and blow them completely out of proportion. We do this by imagining the worst and considering all of the disasters that this relatively minor event will cause. For example, you call to invite a friend over for dinner this Saturday, but they decline your offer. Before allowing him or her to explain their reasoning, you hang up and conclude that they no longer want to be your friend. You then go on to imagine your friend telling all of your other friends how foolish you are. Based on this, you decide that you will no longer have any friends. How about another more salient example? Upon hearing your elderly parent sneeze, you immediately assume that they have symptoms of the coronavirus. You go on to imagine him or her wheezing on their deathbed and conclude that they will be deceased before the end of this month. We can do several things to avoid this unhealthy thinking style. First, we can acknowledge it for what it is. It is simply a thought. When we begin thinking this way, we begin to put things in perspective by considering the other possibilities that may be a result of why we are catastrophizing. Are you sure that your friend no longer wants to be friends? Could they have a valid reason for declining your offer? Is it possible that your elderly parent might be sneezing for other reasons? Could they have seasonal allergies? After putting things into perspective, we can consider the evidence that we have for and against the reason for we are catastrophizing. Do you have enough factual evidence that your friend wants to discontinue your relationship? Have they given you a reason to believe this in the past? What about the factual evidence regarding your elderly parent? Do they have a dangerously high fever? Are they exhibiting any other symptoms that give you evidence to believe your initial thought? Of course, there is the possibility that your friend wants to end your relationship, or your elderly parent does have the COVID disease. However, before reaching these conclusions, it is important to consider all the evidence we have for and against them. By doing this, we can avoid unneeded and unnecessary anxiety. In the worst case scenario, our catastrophe does come true, we will be in a much better position to handle it and overcome it. Overgeneralizing occurs when we make assumptions about the future based on an isolated instance in our past. This type of unhealthy thinking style often leads to a strong sense of hopelessness. For example, you have been cheated on in one of your past relationships. Based on this, you conclude that all of your relationships will consist of being cheated on. Or you know one person who has sneezed and been diagnosed with the COVID disorder. Based on this, you conclude that everyone who sneezes will be diagnosed with the COVID disorder. To overcome this unhelpful thinking style, we can incorporate several strategies. First, we can identify our thinking patterns. We can begin to recognize when these overgeneralizations occur. We can become more mindful of these overgeneralizations by writing them down or starting a journal. After recognizing and recording these negative thoughts, we can begin to recognize patterns related to them. Now that we have a sense of our patterns related to these overgeneralizations, we can begin to challenge them. Are they known to be true for a fact? Would another person view these things in the same way? Finally, we can replace these negative thoughts with more accurate ones. For example, my ex cheating on me is not a reflection of success of my future relationships. It is a reflection of their moral character more than anything. And because one person who sneezes has been diagnosed with the COVID disorder does not mean that everyone who sneezes will be diagnosed with it. In fact, 95% of the population sneezes or blows their nose 4 times a day. Labeling occurs when we assign labels to ourselves, others, and situations during specific circumstances. When we do this, we are defining what we are labeling by a particular circumstance and are not considering other positive characteristics and circumstances. For example, you might label yourself as inadequate because you were unable to do one thing successfully. In this example, you define yourself based on one situation and fail to consider all the other things you can do quite adequately. Or consider you hear someone say something that you do not agree with and assign them the label of stupid. In this example, although you might not agree with what the person has said, you fail to consider that they may have other thoughts or opinions that you could very well agree with. I do agree that people can sometimes do stupid things, but labeling them as stupid based on a particular situation is not fair. There are several actions we can take to avoid this unhealthy thinking style. First, we can accept that we, others, and situations are complex and continuously changing. One action or circumstance does not typically define a person or a situation. Second, we can consider the evidence that does not fit the labels we have assigned. Maybe our assessment of the situation is correct in this instance, but is it correct in every instance? Finally, we can celebrate the complexities and uniqueness of all individuals, including ourselves. Everyone is unique, ever-changing, and multifaceted. Labeling ourselves and others, as well as situations based on a particular circumstance, is an extreme version of overgeneralizing. One bad act or circumstance does not necessarily equate to a bad person or situation. Personalization occurs when we take the blame for everything that goes wrong around us. We do this whether we are responsible for the outcome or not. Specifically, this type of unhealthy thinking style includes believing that we are responsible for the things outside of our control. Although taking responsibility for our lives and circumstances is admirable, it becomes unhelpful if it ends in us feeling like a victim of circumstance. Personalizing everything in this way often leads to feeling a sense of shame or guilt about things that we have no control over. For example, consider that you have a friend in recovery that hasn't been listening to suggestions or taking their sobriety seriously. Eventually they relapse and you feel guilty for not doing enough. In this example, it is important to realize that you are not responsible for the things you do not have control of. Although it is important to support your friend, realizing that their decisions are out of your control is as important as well. Personalization can also stem from a sense of insecurity or anxiety. This type of personalization occurs when we constantly make things about us when they may not be. For example, consider walking into a meeting where everyone is laughing. You automatically think that they are laughing at you, when in reality someone had just told a joke before you walked in. There are several questions we can ask ourselves to combat this type of unhealthy thinking style. By doing this, we can reflect on why we are thinking the way we are. Why do I feel responsible for things that I cannot control? Is this really about me? Am I holding myself to standards that are impossible to meet?